I've been a nurse at this mental health hospital for about 6 years now. You learn a lot over time. How to de-escalate volatile situations. How to listen without judgment. How to stay grounded when chaos is swirling around you. What they don't prepare you for, though, is when the danger doesn't come from a patient's condition, but from the ugly side of humanity that still manages to slip through the cracks. Before we get into the sweet part, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you're watching us for the first time, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss any new story. It started off like any other night shift. Our unit was fully staffed, and for once, things felt calm. It was me, Tasha, Darnell, and Marcus, all of us black, all of us experienced, and all of us in good spirits. We were joking in the break room over cold coffee and granola bars when Mr. Daniels was admitted to our wing. I remember when he walked in, mid-60s tall, with a military-style haircut and this tense, twitchy energy. You can tell a lot from a first impression, and something about the way he looked around the unit like he was sizing us up made my stomach twist a bit. But I reminded myself, this is a mental health facility. Everyone comes in with their own weight, their own demons. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, just like I do with every patient. At first he kept to himself. Then the comments started. Small at first. The kind of stuff you could almost brush off if you weren't paying close attention. I didn't know this was the NAACP wing, he muttered one morning when I brought him his meds. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right, but I let it go. We deal with patients who say all kinds of things. Some of it offensive, much of it rooted in delusion or confusion. I told myself not to take it personally. Then, on the third night, things escalated. We were finishing rounds when I heard singing off-key, loud and weirdly cheerful. I turned the corner and there he was, standing in the hallway like he was putting on a show. I had a dream. Bam, 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 he chanted, making gunshot noises with his mouth. Too bad it didn't come true. It took me a second to understand. He was mocking Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., mocking his death. And he wasn't subtle about it. He was smirking as he made up lyrics about MLK's dumb dream and how the streets got cleaner after he was gone. Tasha stood frozen behind me, her jaw tight. Darnell stepped forward, calm but firm. Mr. Daniels, that's inappropriate. We're here to help you, but we won't tolerate disrespect. And Mr. Daniels just laughed. I'm just expressing myself, he said. Freedom of speech, right? I've heard ignorance before. I've even dealt with patients saying racist things under the influence of psychosis, but this wasn't that. Mr. Daniels was sharp. He knew what he was saying. He was being intentionally cruel. And what made it worse was that he made a point to perform this little show when only the black staff were present. Not once did he act out when our white colleagues were nearby. We reported the incident immediately. I typed everything up in our internal system, flagged it as a safety concern, and requested a team review. I wasn't just shaken. I was angry. Not just for me, but for Tasha, for Darnell, for every black nurse who's ever had to smile through this kind of hate while staying professional. The next morning, our unit supervisor called a quick huddle. I expected her to say something, anything. That made us feel heard. Instead, she told us Mr. Daniels had apologized to management and seemed remorseful. Therefore, his stay would be extended to continue treatment. Extended, no one from leadership had spoken to any of us who were targeted. No one asked how we were doing. No one seemed to care that he hadn't apologized to us, the people he hurt. I remember standing there, stunned. Tasha crossed her arms and stared at the floor. Darnell didn't say a word. And me. I swallowed my reaction and nodded like I understood. But inside, something cracked. Later that day, I sent an email to our supervisor outlining exactly what happened, how it made us feel, and how disappointed I was by the response. I wasn't trying to stir drama, I just wanted acknowledgement. A sense that our safety and dignity mattered. I poured my heart into that message. 2 days later, I got a reply. It said, "Thanks for bringing this to our attention. We will review your concerns." That was it. No meeting, no conversation. Number. Real follow-up. I felt invisible. What's worse is that the rest of the team, our white colleagues, barely acknowledged it either. Some said, "Oh, that guy's just nuts. Don't take it personally." Others offered a half-hearted, "Sorry, that happened," before changing the subject. But it was personal. Deeply so. It's one thing to face racism out in the world, where you can at least prepare yourself. It's another thing entirely to face it at your place of work, from someone you're trying to help. And then to realize your leadership is more interested in maintaining the status quo than protecting you. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that damn song. I kept wondering, what if it had been a different slur? What if he'd mocked a staff member's sexual orientation or religion? Would the response have been the same? Or would there have been an immediate action plan, a zero-tolerance statement read aloud at every shift? The double standard was loud and clear. I love what I do. I really do. This job is more than a paycheck. It's a calling. But now, I walk into that unit with a weight in my chest. I watch my back. I brace for more, because if leadership won't protect us when something this blatant happens, what hope do we have when things get subtle? The most ironic part? Management loves to promote our diverse staff in brochures and on social media. They're proud of how many Black nurses we have, how inclusive our hospital looks. But when it comes down to action, real, uncomfortable, necessary action, they disappear. I want to believe things can get better. I want to believe there's a way to work through this. But right now, I feel like I'm carrying something heavy, alone, and no one wants to help me hold it. Maybe telling this story is the first step toward setting it down. 3 days passed and still, not a word, no meeting, no check-in, no follow-up, just silence. And let me tell you, silence can feel louder than any slur shouted in your face. When someone spits hate at you, at least you know where they stand. But when your own leadership hears that hate and just shrugs, that's a different kind of betrayal. It was a Thursday night when it all started to really boil in me. I was folding linens in the supply room, trying to keep myself busy, trying to keep from crying again. Honestly, I could hear laughter coming. From the nurses' station, it wasn't the usual lighthearted banter either. It was deep belly laughs, the kind you only hear when people feel totally relaxed and untouched by what's going on. I peeked around the corner and saw a couple of the white nurses, Sarah and Jake, huddled around someone's phone, cracking up. I walked past, hoping they'd say something. Anything. Even a simple, "Hey, how are you holding up?" Nothing. They nodded politely, then went back to their little bubble of jokes and memes. Meanwhile, I felt like I was walking around with a knife in my chest. Tasha and I caught up later that night in the staff lounge. She looked exhausted. Her normally vibrant energy was dulled, her voice flat as she leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. "You know what gets me?" she said after a long pause. "It's not even the guy's racism. It's that I expected the system to protect me from it, and it didn't." I nodded. "That was it. Exactly it. I filed a report," she added, "but guess what they told me?" "What?" "That I should try not to take patients' expressions personally, and that, quote, racial commentary can sometimes be a symptom of underlying disorders." I sat up straighter. "Are you serious?" "Oh yeah," she said with a bitter laugh. "Apparently, we're just supposed to absorb it like sponges. Smile, document it, and move on." "Unbelievable," I muttered. But it wasn't. Not really. It was predictable. We stayed there in silence for a while, just two tired Black women sitting in a sterile white room trying to figure out how the hell we'd gotten so used to being dismissed. Later that week, Darnell told us he was taking a few mental health days. "I just need to breathe," he said, "before I start snapping at people who don't deserve it." I couldn't blame him. I was considering doing the same. Every time I walked into the unit, my chest tightened. I felt watched, not by patients but by management. Like they were waiting to see if I was going to make it a bigger issue, and the worst part, Mr. Daniels was still there, still smirking when we passed in the hall, still offering those smug, condescending good evenings like we didn't know exactly who he was. One night, I caught him staring at me from the corner of the rec room, just staring, with this crooked grin like he was daring me to say something. I clenched my fist so hard I thought my nails would break skin, but I didn't say a word, because what would be the point? The system had already chosen who it wanted to protect. That weekend, something strange happened. I got a message on our internal chat system from Marcus. "Hey. Got a minute? Need to talk?" Marcus is quiet. He's the kind of nurse who does his job with precision and keeps his emotions locked up tight. So when he says he needs to talk, you make time. We met in the stairwell during our break, away from cameras and ears. "I've been documenting everything," he said quietly. "Every time he targets us, every time management ignores it. I've got dates, times, screenshots of emails, everything." I blinked. "Why?" "Because I'm tired," he said. "And if they're not going to protect us, we have to protect ourselves." I'm thinking about going to HR, not just with what he said, but with how they handled it. I hesitated. "You think they'll listen?" He sighed. "No, but maybe if we make enough noise, they'll be forced to." That stuck with me all shift. Make enough noise, the idea scared me. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I did, and because I knew the cost. Being labeled difficult in a healthcare setting can quietly end your career. You don't get written up. You just stop getting picked for promotions. You get less desirable shifts. Your evaluations suddenly change tone. You become not a team player. And as a Black nurse, that label sticks twice as fast and 10 times as deep. But how long were we supposed to stay silent? The next morning, I woke up to an email from a patient's family member. It was short, sweet, and unexpectedly kind. Dear Nurse Layla, thank you for caring for my brother during his time on your unit. He told us about how patient and respectful you were, even when he wasn't the easiest. We're grateful for people like you. I stared at that email for a long time because it reminded me why I do this work. Not for the paycheck, not for the accolades, but because I believe every person deserves compassion, even the difficult ones. But compassion isn't the same as tolerance for abuse. I forwarded the email to my supervisor, then added a note. This is the kind of feedback I receive from patients often. Yet when I reported Mr. Daniels' targeted racial harassment, I received no support. I am requesting a formal meeting to discuss this pattern of inaction. I hit send before I could second-guess it by the next shift. The tension in the unit was thicker than ever. Word must have gotten out. Jake barely looked me in the eye. Sarah kept conversations short. Tasha said someone had made a comment in the break room about us blowing things out of proportion. Funny how people who never experience racism are always the first to decide what counts as too much. Then, finally, the meeting was scheduled. Just me, the unit supervisor, and a representative from HR. I didn't know what to expect, but I printed everything. My initial report, my emails, even a couple statements. Marcus and Tasha agreed to write. The meeting was tense, to say the least. The HR rep started with the usual. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We understand this is a sensitive topic. I nodded. It's not just sensitive, it's dangerous. When racism is tolerated, even passively, it creates a hostile work environment. For us, not for him, for us. My supervisor shifted uncomfortably. We have to balance patient rights with staff safety with respect. I cut in, we didn't feel safe. And your response made that worse. I told them everything. How his behavior escalated when only Black staff were present. How leadership's lack of response sent a message loud and clear that we were on our own. The HR rep took notes, asked questions, promised to review protocols. I left that meeting, feeling conflicted. I'd spoken my truth, yes, but would it matter? Later that night, Marcus pulled me aside. You did good, he said. You said what needed to be said. Do you think they'll actually do anything? He shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, now it's in writing. Now they know. And for the first time in days, I slept through the night. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally stopped pretending it wasn't broken. The following week, I walked into work with my badge clipped neatly to my scrubs, a forced smile plastered on my face, and a stomach full of knots. My email had sparked a ripple, small but noticeable. A few of the other nurses who'd been on that same shift with me finally began to talk about it openly. One of them, Patrice, stopped me in the hallway outside the break room and said, I saw what you wrote. You were brave for sending that? Her voice was low, her eyes cautious, but there was a flicker of something like relief there. I wasn't the only one feeling this way. That mattered still. Leadership hadn't done much beyond acknowledging my email with a vague message about investigating further and a promise that steps would be taken. It all felt so procedural, so empty. I wasn't looking for a dramatic scene. I didn't want the patient dragged out in chains or anything extreme. I just wanted to be seen. I wanted the pain we'd all endured to be named and taken seriously. But that didn't seem to be part of the protocol. The incident lingered like smoke in a closed room. Present, clinging, and impossible to ignore. I noticed how some of my coworkers kept their heads down around management now. Conversations that used to flow freely in the break room felt stilted. We were all aware of the silence from above. It wasn't just what had been done, it was what hadn't been said. That quiet had become its own kind of insult. The patient, he was still on our unit, moved to a different wing for a bit, but still around. And every time I saw him, something twisted in me. Not fear exactly, but more like a profound weariness. I tried to maintain my professionalism. That's what we're trained to do, compartmentalize, set aside our emotions. But I'm a human being first, and a Black woman always. Some things cut deeper than professionalism can patch over. One day during lunch, I decided to take a walk outside just to breathe. The cafeteria was too loud and too tense. I sat on a bench out back near the staff parking lot and let the sun warm my skin. My phone buzzed, an email notification from HR. The subject line read, Day Committee Invitation. My eyebrows lifted. Curious, I opened it. The message was short and polite. They were forming a new diversity, equity, and inclusion committee and thought I might be a good fit. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Was this their version of accountability? A peace offering? Or just another performative gesture? Still, I couldn't deny it intrigued me. Maybe, just maybe, This was a crack in the wall, an opening I could wedge my voice through. I replied that I'd consider it and would like more information. That same evening, I received a text from another nurse, Jamal. It simply said, "If you're going to that day meeting, I want in." Turns out, word travels fast around here. The following week, I walked into the first day committee meeting with a mixture of skepticism and hope. The conference room looked like it had been set up for a sales pitch. Bright poster boards printed, agendas, a tray of untouched croissants. But what stood out was the makeup of the group. There were nurses, orderlies, techs, and even 2 members from leadership. Finally, a mix of faces that reflected the actual workforce. We introduced ourselves, and soon it came to my turn. My palms were sweaty, but I spoke anyway. "My name is AITA. I'm a nurse here on the Behavioral Health Unit. I'm also one of the nurses who experienced that recent racist incident with the patient, the one that got swept under the rug." A murmur rippled across the room. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I continued, "but we need to talk about what happened and, more importantly, how it was handled or not handled, because that's the part that stuck with me." The woman from HR nodded slowly. "Thank you for being honest, Arya. That's exactly why we're here. Except it wasn't. At least, not originally. But now, it could be." We spent that hour unpacking not just my experience, but so many others. Stories came pouring out. Small moments of microaggressions, overlooked contributions, jokes that weren't funny. Some of them were subtle, others blunt and brutal. What shocked me was how many people had been carrying this weight silently, just like I had. After the meeting, I felt lighter. Not fixed, not even close, but a little more upright. There was power in saying it aloud. There was even more power in having people hear you and not look away. In the days that followed, small changes began to appear. Management sent out a memo, acknowledging the incident, not naming the patient, but acknowledging the harm caused and pledging to revise the hospital's response protocols. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it felt a bit sanitized, but it was a start. What meant more was when my direct supervisor, Mrs. Hanley, pulled me aside. "I should have checked in sooner," she said, looking me in the eye. "I regret that. I all have some growing to do. I'm sorry for how we made you feel." That moment felt real. She didn't try to excuse it or spin it, she just owned it. And in doing so, she gave me something I hadn't received since that awful shift. Validation. The patient was eventually discharged. He never apologized to us directly, but by that point it didn't matter as much. My healing wasn't going to come from him. It was going to come from what we did next. I kept showing up to the day meetings. I spoke up, not just for myself, but for all the nurses who hadn't found their voice yet. We pushed for new protocols that required staff feedback before major decisions involving patient misconduct. We asked for cultural competency training that went beyond check-the-box webinars. Slowly, those ideas started becoming policy. I wasn't naive. I knew systems don't change overnight, but I also knew revolutions don't start with megaphones. Sometimes they begin with one person saying, "This hurt me," and another replying, "I hear you." By the end of the month, I felt different walking the halls. I no longer felt invisible. I felt like someone who had taken a moment of trauma and turned it into a reason to speak. I felt like part of something larger than myself, a movement, however small, toward real equity in a space that so desperately needed it. And maybe that's the best any of us can do. Speak, resist the silence, make space, because if we wait for someone else to validate our pain, we'll be waiting forever. But if we tell the truth, unapologetically and with heart, then we begin to reclaim something no policy can offer, our dignity. And I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me again. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more of these stories.